Good morning, this is Allison Pena with Worldwide ERC. Thanks to everyone for connecting and welcome to today's webinar program, 2020 Mobility Trends, a Look Ahead, sponsored by Sirva. Before we begin, please take a moment to review Worldwide ERC's webinar disclaimer. And now I would like to go over a few housekeeping announcements. If you are experiencing technical difficulties joining the WebEx session today, please dial 866-779-3239 from the U.S. Email questions may be sent to support@webex.com. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you have a question during the presentation, you may submit it online at any time. To submit your question, please use the Q&A tab, which is located in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. Simply click on the tab and type your question into the dialog box at the bottom of the screen and then click the Send button. Please note that all written questions selected during this webinar will be answered publicly. An email containing a link to the course evaluation and information on accessing the handout and recording of this session will go out later this afternoon. Please be on the lookout for it. It will come to you from messenger@webex.com. During this webinar, we will be polling the audience at times. When a poll is opened, it will appear in the polling dialog box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen below the Q&A box. The question will appear in both the slide and polling dialog box. Simply select your answer and click Submit. The results will display in the same dialog box once the poll is closed. This webinar is worth 1 CRP and 1 GMS credit. If you are a GMS seeking CE credit for this webinar, you must include the name and date of this event on your GMS renewal application at the time you apply for recertification. The renewal application is available online. If you hold your CRP designation, credit will be added automatically to your record within about a week of this program. Attendees must be registered and attend the full meeting to receive credit. The archived webinar session will be available to all for the next month and available to Worldwide ERCs for a second month. After 2 months, our Premier Learning Platform subscribers can continue to view this session for up to 2 years. CRPs who log in and view the archive session will also receive continuing education credit automatically upon completion of the session. Credit processing fees for webinars will no longer be collected. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Taryn Kramer, Vice President of Global Advisory Services at Sirva, has over 20 years of experience in the global mobility space, including expatriate tax preparation, international assignment program management and administration, and global mobility strategy and transformation consulting. Taryn has participated in projects to design and/or redesign and implement global mobility programs for multinational organizations. Taryn has also served as a training facilitator covering global mobility marketplace trends and best practices for internal and external learning courses. Kathy Burrows has more than 22 years of experience in global relocation, real estate, and account management. As Director of Global Advisory Services, Kathy works with current and potential clients to ensure that their mobility programs are providing the support and governance necessary to align with defined organizational and talent objectives and priorities. Her experience provides a depth of knowledge that enables her to blend talent management, program governance, and mobility objectives with operations excellence to support a client's vision of mobility support. Kathy holds both the Certified Relocation Professional and Global Mobility Specialist designations from Worldwide ERC and has been a 2-time recipient of Sirva's Leadership Award in Client-Centric Performance. I am delighted to welcome both Taryn and Kathy. Thank you for joining us, and I will now turn the program over to Taryn.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you to ERC for yet another opportunity to deliver content to our participants. As Allison mentioned, Kathy and I are both members of Sirva's Global Advisory Services Group, where our primary role is to provide mobility design, implementation, and advisory services to our clients and prospects. We also focus on delivering mobility thought leadership content to the market, as well as information specific to market trending and best practices. We're thrilled to have such high registration numbers today, and we're going to assume that it's because you're very interested in the topic and not just trying to escape any additional conversations about COVID-19, which I know are consuming most of our lives these days. We hope that everyone is staying healthy across the globe and continues to do so. So today's webinar is an opportunity I'm going the wrong way. Today's webinar is an opportunity for us to provide you with a preview of Sirva's 2020 Mobility Survey results. The survey results and this webinar are intended to provide insights and observations for you to understand how organizational priorities impact the way in which mobility functions operate, to be able to identify opportunities for mobility to play a larger role as a key business partner within your organizations, to define and identify ways that the mobility service delivery model or the administration approach can provide support to the organization in addition to the package support that's provided to relocating employees. To highlight some shifts in the way that relocation support is being delivered to employees and the reasons behind that, and to identify some opportunities where technology can play a role in enabling the mobility process, both for stakeholders, so individuals that are initiating the relocation, as well as the actual relocating employee. Similar to our 2017 and 2018 surveys, our 2020 survey had a bit of a different focus from what you may see from other surveys that appear out in the market or other reports out in the market. Our goal is always to provide information above and beyond the tactical or the more administrative support that's provided to relocating employees. We look at the survey results and mobility programs holistically in order to offer and suggest areas of misalignment between organizational, stakeholder, and employee goals and the way in which mobility programs are structured and administered. The webinar will provide a preview of findings from our 2020 survey, our third since 2017. This year, we had 267 participants, which represented 258 unique organizations, a 9% increase in both categories from the prior survey that we conducted in 2018 and released in 2019. The target audience for the survey was mobility leaders and teams. Participants self-identified from 13 industry categories, and the top three that were represented were manufacturing, finance and insurance, and information technology and services. In terms of headquarter locations, we had 43% from North American headquartered organizations, 6% from Latin and South American headquartered organizations, 30% from the EMEA region, and 17% from Asia Pacific. The survey results focused on 6 key themes: employee and customer experience. It's important to remember here that when making decisions about program design and administration, mobility teams have 2 customers, both the internal stakeholders who initiate the relocation and then the relocating employee and any accompanying family. Agile mobility programs, otherwise said, the ability of organizations to design programs that reflect the changing needs of both the business and the employee, and the ability to then deliver the program in such a way that aligns with those preferences. Relocation success, so we had some questions this year that focused on how organizations define a successful relocation, or do they not define relocation success at all, and how the definition of a successful relocation should and does impact the design and administration of the program, as well as other considerations and other links to initiatives within the organization. Managing investment and budgets, so managing the spend associated with relocating employees, and how you can best rationalize that spend, how you can not necessarily cut spend from your program, but offer more opportunities to a larger population of employees. Mobility and technology, how technology can enable mobility, again, for both the customer stakeholder and the employee, providing real-time access to move status, the ability to connect with contacts virtually in real time, and the ability to provide some enhanced reporting around spend and other program metrics. And then mobility branding. It's really, the brand of the mobility function within the organization, and where there are opportunities to enhance that brand. We talk a lot about demonstrating the advisory partnership that mobility can offer to an organization and making decisions around candidate selection, package design, and then package implementation. So just some additional thoughts on how you can enhance that brand. Some of you may recognize this question if you saw our prior survey in 2018. Mobility continues to be significant and continues to play a critical role in the ability of an organization to meet goals and priorities, both with regard to growth and the development of their workforce. Our 2020 results surprisingly showed a bit of a decline in both responses as compared to 2018. So 73% for 2020 of organizations rated mobility as extremely important or very important to the overall success of the organization. In 2018, that response was 80%. 35% of organizations rated career experience outside of the home location as important for career development in 2020. In 2018, that number was 49%. Why do we see a bit of a decline? Some of this is just conjecture, but it may represent a shift in employee preferences towards shorter term or more virtual opportunities. So depending on how mobility is defined with the organization, that may not include extended business travelers or some of the shorter term assignments that may still be taking place and offering the opportunity for the employee to have experience outside of the home location. Or it could be because organizations are evaluating alternative ways to achieve growth and developmental opportunities without incurring costs to physically relocate employees. Or it may just represent that organizations have identified new ways to meet resource or talent development needs. And we'll explore some of those as we dive into some of the other statistics that we have here. In terms of top organizational priorities, one of the key themes that we talked about when we went through the kind of the 6 overall themes that we see, but it's really about employee and customer experience. And this is underscored here as a top organizational priority when you look at the people category. The exact response to the survey question was people-focused, which could imply a variety of things. Focusing on learning opportunities for the workforce, focusing on workforce development or experiences and support, or focusing on workforce engagement. So the response here really encompasses a variety of different categories, but again, underscores the focus or the trend that we're seeing towards more employee-centered programs where they're more customized based on employer stakeholder preferences. We see the people theme extending to all areas of an organization, but specifically for mobility, the theme is manifesting in the form of program flexibility, both in the policies that are available as well as the way in which policy support is delivered, technology enablement, and the ability to provide more mobility opportunities to a broader population. For perspective, when we look at 2018 results, cost management appeared in our 2018 results at 19% for an organizational priority. You'll see that that's fallen off the top 3 list in 2020. It could arguably be replaced with efficiencies. The more efficient that a program is, it follows that the more rationalized the costs become. But it was interesting that that fell off. Talent development also fell off. Talent development was at 13% in 2018. Again, here that could be encompassed by people. The top 3 priorities in 2018 were growth at 53%, and then a significant gap between the number 2, which was cost management at 19%, and then talent management at 13%. So a bit of a more even distribution here of priorities between people and growth for 2020. When we look at why people are relocating, top 4 answers are to fill a specific resource gap in the host or destination location at 52%, relocating in order to fill a talent or leadership requirement. Situations where the employee needs to have opportunities outside of their home location in order to meet some talent development or leadership requirements. Self-select volunteers at 13%, and then cultural awareness. So really to gain some cultural awareness, not necessarily for a particular location, but rather cultural or organizational awareness, to distribute that amongst different offices throughout the globe or the country. What's interesting here is that when we look at these stats compared to 2018 stats, in 2018 we had resource gap was 57% of the drivers behind why people were moving. We've dropped down here to 52% in 2020. You could argue that perhaps organizations are doing a better job at managing their resource pipeline to fill gaps locally or via alternative methods, such as more short-term assignments or extended business travelers. We did see a jump when it came to people relocating for leadership or talent development requirements. So in 2018, that response was 28%. You'll see 32% for 2020, so a 4% jump. Again, here you could argue that organizations are becoming more strategic. They're recognizing that link between mobility and talent and really plugging mobility into the talent initiatives as a solution for developing talent and future leaders of the organization. Self-select volunteers, where we saw a drop from 2018 at 16%, down 3% to 13% in 2020. Again, here, this could be an indication that organizations are doing a better job at really identifying why individuals are being relocated and rationalizing whether or not company support will be provided for individuals that volunteer to relocate or self-select to relocate. All relocations represent a significant investment for any organization, so being able to carve out populations, specifically the self-select or the volunteer individuals, where company support is either not provided at all or is provided at a bare minimum or basic level, that represents an opportunity to trim costs from your program. So where cost minimization or cost rationalization is a real driver for a mobility program, that population is a significant opportunity. And then cultural awareness, we didn't see a significant change there between 2018 and 2020. 2018 was at 12%, so just a 1% drop to 2020 for cultural awareness. Shifting move types. So again, something that we've been seeing over the course of the past couple years. In 2018, when we asked how move types, a variety of different move types would shift in the next 1 to 3 years, the top 2 responses were specific to an increase in short-term assignments at 41% in 2018. So you'll see just a 1% uptick there for the 2020 survey, and then 43% in 2018 for extended business travelers. So a 5% uptick when we asked that question again for 2020. Why? I think the reasons around this are consistent with what we saw in prior years, but organizations are really looking for ways to provide more relocation or work away from home opportunities to a larger population. Short-term assignments and extended business traveler arrangements are a significant opportunity to be able to do that. To be able to not necessarily have a great impact on total relocation spend, but yet still offering those opportunities to a wider array of your employee base or your workforce. Some of this may also be driven by employee preference. It's very disruptive for an employee, particularly where they have a family, to uproot their family for long durations of time to a new location. So some of these shorter term assignments or extended business travel arrangements may be a reflection of employee preference. It's also a way to rationalize cost, again, doing more with either the same amount or not necessarily an incremental increase in spend, but still being, again, able to offer more opportunities to a larger array of employees. Which brings us to our first polling question. So does your organization have a formalized definition for a successful relocation? Simple responses here, yes, no, or unsure. This is a new question that we added to our survey for 2020, and it really ties to some of the conversations that we've been having around return on investment. We know that return on investment is a significant focus area, or I guess conversation topic for a lot of organizations. They want to understand how they can really maximize that return on investment, given that mobility is a significant investment, regardless of the move type, whether it's a domestic move type, short-term, long-term, global. So they want to make sure, organizations want to make sure that they're moving the right people with the right package and providing the right opportunity for that person. So we really wanted to dive in, and I think the findings, which we'll get to once our polling closes, the findings actually are pretty interesting, and I think really can serve as a basis for some interesting discussion within your organizations. So I'm just waiting for it to refresh as the poll has ended, and then we'll get the answers here, and then we'll flip over to what our survey results showed us. Okay, so 35% of you answered that yes, your organization does have a formalized definition for a successful relocation. 34% said no, and 20% were unsure. So as I flip over to our survey results, it's really interesting, but I think all of you in your responses may be kind of helping us with our talk track here. So when we asked this question, again, remembering that the audience for our survey was mobility leaders and mobility teams, 79% said yes, and it's defined as an employee remaining with the company for 1 to 2 years following the date of transfer or repatriation. 53% responded that as long as the employee completed the intended assignment duration or the relocation, that was considered successful. And then 36% of our respondents indicated that as long as the cost was within budget, that was considered successful. So again, this is probably could be a webinar in and of itself, but the whole idea of ROI is a very interesting topic, I think, for all of us, largely in part because how you define ROI can vary greatly from one organization to the next. And even within the same organization, different roles within that organization or different positions within that organization have different definitions of ROI. You look at a salesperson versus, someone that's in maybe a more of a support function like HR or finance or legal. How you define return on investment for those different roles within the same organization may be very different. One of the things that jumped out to us when we asked this question was, are we getting responses from mobility leaders, and do those responses align with what the business would answer in terms of defining a successful relocation? Just anecdotally, I think most business leaders would define a successful relocation in that 36% where the relo is coming in within budget. But are they intending to have a broader definition of relocation success and tie it more to tenure with the organization after the relocation is complete or the assignment is complete? Is the definition of success well known within the organization? Is it something that's just contained within the mobility team? Is the definition of success communicated or designed or developed with in partnership with stakeholders? Are employees aware of how the organization is defining a successful relocation, and then what their roles and responsibilities are in order to drive that success? All of those are unknown, and I think definitely a basis for some of the conversations that you all can have with leaders within your organization. It's important to have a definition of a successful relocation, have that definition be consistent across all involved stakeholders and parties, including the employee, because then it also drives decisions around what's provided to support the actual relocation of the employee, but also potentially support that's provided outside of the mobility program. So when you look at the 79%, There's a requirement here that the employee remains with the company for 1 to 2 years following the date of transfer or repatriation. What's happening outside of the mobility or the relocation process to really drive that success? Is the employee being paired with mentors or peers to help keep them engaged with the organization, to really help them take what they learned as part of the relocation or the skills that they developed as part of their assignment and really bring those back to the organization, again, to drive loyalty and to encourage them to remain for that 1 to 2 year period. So I'll flip it over to Kat to talk about some of the mobility challenges that were highlighted as part of the survey.
Great, thanks, Karen. So when we asked organizations to give us some insight into what they felt their top mobility challenges were, and the top 3 that we have this year were also the top 3 for last year. So it's process efficiency, it's cost management, and speed to deploy. We did see a little bit of a difference in the order of the challenges as far as how they ranged for organizations. So for 2019, cost management was at 61%, and it's moved down to 50%. So is our number 2 choice. Process efficiency is number 1, where it was number 2 last year at 46%. And speed to deploy is number 3, again for the second year in a row, and it went up 3 points to 36%. So what can mobility teams do to really minimize these challenges to their programs? And it really starts off first by leveraging their vendors as much as possible for repeatable processes. So when you look at your process for your mobility program, what things are you doing in-house yourselves on your mobility team, and what do you have your partners doing for you? So it's looking at some of these repeatable processes like cost projections or offer letters, letters of assignment. Maybe it's the pre-acceptance calls that you might be having with candidates or assignees or employees that are thinking about relocating or going on assignment. You could even cover the initial calls that you have with the candidates, the assignees, or the employees to go over the intended relocation package and the support that would be provided to them. As these activities happen over and over again, it is something that you could consider taking off of your actual mobility team and outsourcing to other partners that you are working with to kind of free up your mobility time to address some of the other challenges. So it could create some efficiencies for you, it could create some cost management for you, and it could also speed up the ability to deploy talent by allowing your team to do some other activities that would push the actual process of deploying the talent a little bit quicker. You could also take a look at technology solutions. What are you manually tracking from a data perspective on your program, and what are you trying to patch into your existing systems to help manage your program? And is that the most efficient way to handle those activities? Really taking a moment to take a look at your vendors and your partners that you work with and maximizing the technology that they have in place today, the databases that they have, because they do collect a lot of really good information about your employees and your program. And there might be a better way to get that information to you, whether it's using their databases to help your program, or maybe having them collate the data and giving it to you in a different kind of format that makes it easier for you to use it on your side, whether you're putting it into another system or not. Again, that hits all 3 of these as far as efficiency, cost management, and the ability to help speed up deploy talent by eliminating some duplicated efforts and some manual work that could be done a little bit more efficiently. It's also taking a look at the vendors that you work with and the purchasing power that your suppliers could have for you. You have direct relationships with some of your mobility sources like household goods, language training, maybe visa and immigration. There may be an opportunity for you to receive some cost savings, potentially working through some of your vendors, because your vendors are going to be purchasing those services in bulk because they have lots of other customers that they're supplying and supporting. So you may be able to find some cost savings there as well. It also can start by taking a look at reviewing your program as a whole and what your program support is and the delivery mechanisms that you have in place to support the program. It's almost as if it's a current state assessment where you're taking a look at your mobility processes, identifying what kind of support we're providing, What are our processes? What are the handoffs to the particular subject matter experts or vendors that we're working with? Are we leveraging those vendors? And are we meeting our internal customer needs? So that's not only the employee that's going through the relocation process, but it's also the businesses that you're supporting with your mobility program. And taking a look through that lens of a current state assessment, you'll see some things that you do really well and are very efficient. But I think you'll also find some areas where you could provide some better efficiency, where you might be able to leverage your vendors a little bit better, maybe change some of the handoff processes and the communications, which will ultimately offer you some cost savings and the ability to speed up deployment as well. Also, in the candidate selection process, are you moving the right people to the right place with the right packages? And this really starts with, is mobility being brought into the process soon enough in the process with the candidates? And how can you better position the value of your organization and increase the visibility of your brand so that you can help the business pick the right person, provide the right support, give the proper timeline expectations, and then get the talent deployed to the right locations in a proper manner that meets everyone's expectations. And so when you look at this kind of holistically, all of these represent a really good business case for building strong mobility relationships with your partners and leveraging your subject matter experts as much as possible to help address these challenges, to create more efficiencies, help you contain your costs, and speed up the process for moving your talent to their destination location. So next, we're going to move to our second polling question, which is, how can you improve the employee experience? And when we reached out to the organizations, we asked them from their experience, how can you improve the experience the best? Is it by increasing communication? Is it by providing more program flexibility? Is it by becoming engaged earlier in the mobility process? Is it providing more relocation support? Or is there some other way that you can improve the employee experience that doesn't fall into these categories? We'll give you a few minutes to take a look at these questions and answer them. But traditionally in the past, when you've looked at employee experience, a lot of people just automatically go to benefits, providing more support, providing more temporary living, providing a home finding trip or more days on the home finding trip. Just providing additional benefits and support in some ways is how the industry has looked at providing a better experience for the employee. Where in the most recent years, we've really seen organizations take an inward look at how the process touches the individual as they go through the mobility program that adds to that employee experience, and finding different ways to provide a better experience that are not just increasing the costs and the benefits being provided to the employee, but it's moving through the process and feeling supported and connected within the process for a better mobility experience. So we do have our survey results have come in, and 43% of you feel that increasing communication is the top way to improve the employee experience, 34% with program flexibility, 27% of providing earlier engagement in the process, and 12% with more relocation support. So when we take a look at our survey results, it's matching up very nicely again, where 50% of respondents said that it was increased communication. Flexibility came in at number 2 at 47%, and earlier mobility engagement came in at number 3 with 45%. So when we look at these results, they've changed a little bit from last year. Last year's results did show that earlier mobility engagement was number 1 at 56%, and it's moved to number 3 as far as importance for the respondents of the survey. Increased communication moved up to number 1 from number 2, and program flexibility has remained the same at 47, but it's moved into position 2 as far as the best choices for improving the employee experience. So how have mobility teams impacted their employee experience within these areas? So some of the things that we've seen organizations do well to approach the employee experience in the communication arena is really starting to look at what they provide the employee. Do they have a policy? Is it a paper policy? Is it a virtual policy that they can get to easily? Is it a policy that's sent to them in an actual PDF document? what kinds of communication are sent via the offer letters or assignment letters, any other communication that's sent by email, and taking a look at the content of it. And is it timely, first of all? Did they get it at the right time so that it helps them at the appropriate moments? Is the information concise and meaningful that's provided to them? It all adds to the employee experience. Then they've also taken a look at the milestones as the employee moves through the relocation experience, as far as what other types of communication checkpoints are in the process, what types of information flow to the employee, and again, is that communication timely and is it relevant that they're receiving? And then also making sure within their programs that there's open lines of communication with the employee to share feedback on how the process is working for them, how they're feeling about the relocation, and the ability to provide information back into the providers of their services if they need additional services or if they have an exception, and making that process easy will make the employee experience much better for the employee. Flexibility is a real key, and it can also tie into communication. How is communication provided to your employees that are relocating? Is it provided in a document? Is it provided by a person face-to-face? Is it provided virtually through a phone call or a Skype call? Is the information available through a web portal? Is it available through their phone, either through text messaging or mobile apps? Providing the flexibility of information within your program is really key for the employee experience, as it allows the employee to access information in different ways depending upon where they are and when they want to access information. Having strong mobility support for your employee allows the employee the flexibility to do other things that are also important as part of the relocation process. So when a program is able to coordinate and provide services for a lot of the logistics, household goods, destination services, the employee can concentrate on being at the house and identifying what things they need to pack, going to the schools and getting necessary paperwork on their education for their students to bring with them to their destination location. So that strong mobility support allows the flexibility for the employee to do the other things that they need to get done as part of the mobility experience. And then also a lot of programs have moved to some flexible support that allows the family to have a little bit more influence on when things happen. And this can be as easy as being able to modify the relocation timeline, to have the ability to push it and pause it as needed for the family. That could be from when vendors are engaged and how they're engaged. It also can cover choosing additional benefits that match the employee's need versus having some hard-coded benefits that they must use. And then in some cases, some programs allow the flexibility for the employee to coordinate some services, like their pre-decision trip or their home finding trip, or maybe their final trip tickets. That will allow flexibility within the program that will add to the employee experience. And also by bringing mobility earlier into the engagement, it provides the opportunity for mobility to help the business select the right person and apply the right benefits of support, which will greatly enhance the experience of the employee. You know, identifying whether a local hire or a relocation is the best choice, and then understanding, you know, the compliance activities that will need to be in place for immigration and tax as well. Also make sure that the package is appropriately supported so the employee has all the benefits that they need to make it a smooth transition for them. It's also providing a better understanding of the timeline of when we're deploying the employee. The employee really understands when they can leave and when they can arrive and the activities that must happen in order to make that happen. So again, the employee is not under pressure to move faster than they should, or under pressure from the business to move faster and potentially make some mistakes by arriving in the new location and they don't have the proper immigration paperwork and they get sent back on the plane back home. It also provides an opportunity where the mobility team can provide insight into the support ahead of time. It helps eliminate any concerns or anxieties that the employee or their family may have about the potential relocation. And it also prevents the employee from starting mobility activities too soon or engaging vendors or incurring costs that they shouldn't before it's time for them to be doing those things, and allows them to leverage the program that you've taken the time to provide for them in the appropriate manner. So with that, we are going to move into Our next polling question, Karen, on Core Flex programs. And so our question here is, do you offer one or more Core Flex programs? The answers are easy, yes, no, or unsure.
Thanks, Kat. So we'll give people a chance to offer. So the question that we asked during our survey specifically read a little bit different than this one, but still similar. But does one or more of your mobility policies include core, otherwise defined as required or mandatory provisions, and flexible or discretionary or optional provisions? Part of the reason why I wanted to clarify that when we look at, obviously, the responses that we get from all of you participating versus the survey, one could argue that all programs or all policies are core flex. It's something I personally argue. You know, I think when you look at any policy where there's either situational discretionary components or where there are more structured discretionary components, so segmented policies, where the individual is getting a certain component of support based on potentially their level or why they're being relocated. All of those would be considered or could be considered, I'll say, core flex programs. The definition of core flex within our industry varies. Well, your responses actually line up pretty well. So 47% of you said that you do offer one or more core flex programs. 28% said no, and 17% were unsure. So if you look at the results that we had, again, you know, somewhat aligned here. So when we ask the question again, does one or more of your mobility policies include core provisions and flexible or discretionary provisions? 55% of organizations said yes, they do offer that today. So just a slight increase from 47% based on all of your responses. We then asked if organizations were planning to offer a core flex program in the next 12 months, which added an additional 15%. And then we asked just abstractly in the future, is this something that you would consider? And we added an additional 21%. So total of that, if everyone were to go ahead and implement all those folks that were either thinking about it in the next 12 months or the future, that would be 91% of programs offer core flex as an option. So again, it kind of underscores the argument that really a lot of that depends on how you define core flex, who has the discretion to make decisions around what's flexible or discretionary. Is that the employee? Is that the stakeholder that's initiating the relocation? There is a significant difference there when it comes to domestic programs versus global programs. Domestic programs definitely allow for more flexibility for the employee or more discretion for the employee to make those decisions, where global programs, it's very traditionally either the mobility team or the initiator, the business leader of the initiator of the relocation or the business leader who's making decisions around what gets included in a package versus what doesn't get included. So again here, you know, a lot of how you discuss core flex depends on how you define core flex for your organization. I think it's important anytime you look at statistics like this, whether they're coming from Sirva or another source, it's really important to understand how some of the questions were phrased or how they were positioned, just to make sure that you're comparing like to like, because again, you could ask 3 people within the same organization and they potentially define core flex differently. So we'll shift focus here just a little bit to lump sums. We know that lump sums continue to be kind of a key topic area for lots of programs in terms of an option for delivering support to employees. The question that we specifically asked as our survey was whether a lump sum was provided in addition to other relocation support, which could take the form of a miscellaneous allowance, you know, mobility premium, an assignment allowance, or a location allowance. I think historically, when organizations or when questions were asked around lump sum, there wasn't any kind of differentiation between a miscellaneous relocation allowance and a lump sum. So we really wanted to distinguish between the two, where a lump sum becomes a delivery mechanism or approach to deliver support to an employee that's recommended. So a lump sum is intended to cover, for example, home leave trips. The difference between that and the miscellaneous relocation allowance is the miscellaneous relo allowance becomes a bit of a catch-all, right, versus something that's intended to cover some specific support. So we wanted to find out situations or move types where lump sums were offered, again, in addition to other designated relocation support. So 52% didn't have any lump sum component in their packages at all. 33% offered a lump sum in addition for global programs, 27% for U.S. domestic, and 11% for other domestic, so non-U.S. domestic moves. I think it's important at this point to highlight some of the stats that we got from our 2020 survey when we asked about lump sum only programs. So where the only support that was provided to the individual was in the form of a lump sum. Overwhelmingly, where programs had it, they offered those only to U.S. domestic moves, so 30%. Only 3% offered a lump sum only package for international moves. And then an additional 10% indicated that they offer them for both U.S. and domestic programs. So again, when you talk about lump sum only programs, where they're provided, the overwhelming provision is in the scope of U.S. domestic, which makes sense. That's what we've seen historically. So we don't necessarily see a significant change there, even with some of the tax reform that came out in 2018. When you look at lump sum only programs or delivery approaches, and you break it down by the employee level that's receiving that lump sum only, for U.S. domestic moves, 93% of those lump sums are provided to interns, with the remaining percentage being spread out among new hires, early career employees, mid-career employees, and senior career employees. When you looked at global, again, they're overwhelmingly being provided for interns and new hires. So I think, again, it's just important to understand that where lump sum only packages exist or approaches exist, they're primarily for U.S. domestic, and they're primarily offered for interns or junior level employees. We also, similar question to what we asked in 2018, so we have some comparison data here. We asked what support is intended to be covered by a lump sum only, or by the lump sum. And again, this refers to lump sum only packages. So these are not packages that would include a lump sum as part of additional support that's provided to the employee. So not huge, well, some shifts here. So in 2018, 41% of lump sums were covering temp living, 39% household goods shipment, 40% travel to and from the destination, and 33% covering house hunting trips. So in terms of the support that's intended to be covered, we saw increases from 2018 to 2020 in all areas of these responses. When organizations are considering using a lump sum, whether it's a lump sum only approach or whether it's in conjunction with other support that's provided to the employee, it's really important to consider the culture of your organization as well as the employee that you're delivering that support to. As we showed through some of our stats, the prevalence is to offer lump sums only to U.S. domestic relos and to individuals that are more junior or early in their career, particularly, interns and new hires. It's really important to understand that providing or offering a lump sum can have some pros, right? So it can provide fixed cost or transparency for budgeting purposes. It can provide the employee with a lot of flexibility or autonomy to make decisions about how those relocation funds are allocated. The negatives are really that it has the potential to significantly impact the experience of the employee and the relocating family. The employee essentially becomes their own relocation manager. So they're in a position where they have to navigate through the relocation process on their own. They have to make decisions without necessarily having an understanding of the impact of those decisions on how to allocate that spend and really get the most for that spend. There are also, in some jurisdictions, the fact that you're providing a lump sum to the employee is considered just giving cash to the employee, so there may not be any tax benefits available by using that delivery mechanism. And then depending what controls and structure you have in place, there may be an inability to track that spend. So when you talk about reporting on total relocation spend or investment for the organization, lump sums often get excluded from that because there's no way to track how employees are spending those funds and whether or not they're using them in the way in which they were intended. We do see a bit of a disconnect in some of these responses around what the lump sum is intended to consider. But again, I think if you position it in such a way that if you consider it in such a way that these are lump sum only packages, it makes sense that we see such high percentages intended to cover things like temporary living or household goods shipment, or house hunting trips, where under a more combined program where the individual is getting a lump sum and additional line item support, we wouldn't typically see temporary living being covered by that lump sum. That's something that's delivered directly to the employee through a vendor. Same with household goods shipment. That's not something that when you look at a program that has lump sum as one component, but also incorporates other relocation support items, household goods isn't typically something that you see standing out there on its own. So with that, we'll flip over and see if anyone has any questions. Please go ahead and use the Q&A section on the right side of your screen if you want to offer up any questions. While we're waiting to see if anything comes in there, as Allison mentioned at the beginning of our session, all of you that participated will get a copy of the slides that we covered today. Our contact information for Kathy and I is included in that deck, so please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions, or want more details about a particular topic that we covered. And we're in the process of developing the full report. So some of you may have seen the reports that we published in 2017 and 2018. The same or similar type of report will be coming out in 2020 in the very near future. So keep an eye out for that. So Allison, it doesn't look like we have any questions. So I think we are good to close. Thank you all for participating today.
Okay. Thank you very much to Taryn and Kathy both for sharing your insights with us today. I would also like to offer a very special thank you to Sirva for their sponsorship of this webinar. You all have been a great audience. I hope you've enjoyed the program. Just a quick reminder, keep an eye on the Worldwide ERC website. We're constantly adding new events. And definitely watch your email later this afternoon for the email containing links to a course evaluation and to the page where you can access the handout and recording of this session. It will come to you from messenger@webex.com. Thank you all again. Have a great afternoon, and you may now disconnect.